I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up. But you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself for preservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with myself for preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And welcome everybody on this windy weather day to the wonderful Political Unmuted and Socialist Think Tank. And don't ever forget that. And Political Unmuted is honoured to be hosted on this platform, which is changing the country. And hopefully the world. Welcome to the Dream Team. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you all. And straight down to business, I think. Hello, Anthony Riley. Anthony calls us progressives. That's absolutely true, but it doesn't begin with a W, Anthony. You have to work on that one. We're Wing today. Right, okay, moment of the week. The wonderful weather. Windy weather. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Welcome. Okay, anyway, now, moment of the week. I do know that earlier this week, the two ladies were falling out about their moment of the week. They both wanted the same moment of the week. Ladies, did you sort it out? And which of you is going to take the moment of the week?
You can have it, Laura.
Thank you. We never fall out. We discuss in an adult fashion as we are grown-up women.
I thought you were having one each. I thought you were, because you did more than one thing.
We did do more than one thing in one day, yeah. But my moment of the week is on Saturday, the Women's Banner Group unveiled the first of three we unveiled 3 blue plaques dedicated to women across County Durham. There had previously been none when we started this. So now that we're led to believe there are 4. One of them doesn't count because we didn't do it. But the actual moment of the week for me was when we unveiled one dedicated to the Aycliffe Angels at Rough 59 in Aycliffe, which used to be the munitions factory. And there was actually an Aycliffe Angel there. She turned up, she was 100, and she was called Muriel Scott, and she was wonderful, and she was just like, I couldn't believe it. She was like fitter than me. And it was really emotional, and we met like a lot of family members of people who had parents who were Aycliffe Angels or grandparents, and yeah, it was really lovely. And it kind of, we have this way where we just kind of get on with stuff, and it's not until moments like that where we go, oh God, this is a big deal, isn't it? So it was very much that, and it was just amazing. So really nice to have something positive to start the weekend with.
Absolutely. Now I wanted to go to that unveiling, but because of an item on the agenda today, which is the explosion of COVID, Barbara and I have decided that we're just going to withdraw from human contact. We're just sort of locking ourselves in our house until this wave disappears. And so I didn't go, and I was so regretful of it, because it's not just politically important that we recognise these women, is it? It's an aspect of our history which must not be forgotten. And there were 2 other plaques. Do you want to tell us about those?
Yeah, so there's a plaque gone up in Spennymoor, which is dedicated to Kate Maxey, who was a nurse in World War I, and she was highly decorated, and we actually watched a film that was made by Lonely Tower Productions, I think it was. It was fantastic to learn a bit more about her, because I'd never heard of her, and I think that's the problem, isn't it? We haven't heard about these women at all. But she like got hit with a load of shrapnel and was like really seriously injured, bleeding out and everything, and she still stayed at work looking after all the soldiers and trying to fix people and help people, and just fantastic, really. So she was the second one, and then we unveiled one to Bella Lawson. She's actually on it with her husband, but we let that one slide because she was very good. So she's she sort of did a lot of things in Beamish, looking after children, and I think she had a lot to do with like Labour Party women's sections and things like that. Her and her husband are quite well known over there. There's a school and everything dedicated to them. But it's nice to have her name up, because everybody knows Jack, her husband, but nobody really knew all the hard work that she'd done. So it was really good to recognise that as well.
Thank you. And I was very impressed, just finally on this moment of the week, to see you on the television being interviewed like a pro, Laura, like a pro.
It's not as I'm so used to talking to cameras and screens now. The hardest part of it was actually doing a speech in front of real life people. But yeah, no, it was fine. It's not hard when you know what you're talking about. It's something you're really interested in.
Anyway, well done. It was just fantastic. Thank you so much. And have you got, just before we go, have you got any plans to get any other?
Yes, so watch this space. We are going to be holding an event on we're hoping the 5th of December. It's still very early in the planning. And what we did last time was we held a hustings where people came and said, this is who I want on a plaque and this is why, and we voted. This time it's going to be completely different. You come with your little speech or your little bit of information about who you think should be on a plaque, and we put that application in, every single one. There are some boxes you need to tick for the County Durham scheme, but we're going to apply for them all, and we're going to just try and get as many as we possibly can. So watch out on the Women's Banner Group Facebook page, or email us and get on our mailing list, and we'll send you all the information, and we'll make sure that whoever wants to be represented should be.
Jolly good. It's time we took the exclusively his out of history and made it
nice. Oh, I'm pinching that, John.
Sort of well done to you. Brilliant. And Sam, that was so generous of you, because you were massively involved in that as well, weren't you?
Yes. Luckily, when you've got three banners, God, not yet, 3 blue plaques to unveil, there's lots of opportunity for people to speak. And to the point where at the end of the day, Laura was like, please don't make me do it. You go do it. So I got to do all of this.
I just have to butt in here and just point out that Samantha is absolutely unreal. I might have said like 3 lines on the news, but Samantha, at the last minute, I was like, Samantha, please, will you go and do a speech? I can't do another one. She was like, yeah, okay, got up and just barnstormed the whole place. Her speech was fantastic. We have it on video and it's on our Facebook page. Check it out. She hadn't prepared. She's unbelievable. She's very, very proud to be working with her on that.
Yeah, it was very much fun. But yes, so I got to speak in the church prior to the Bella Lawson unveiling, and then go and just do another brief introduction to what the Women's Banner Group are about at the scene of the blue plaque. But yeah, less said about that the better, really, because we're not going to go into it here. It was a bit touch and go at some point. There were some it's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. Doesn't matter where you go, even if you are unveiling 3 plaques to 3 women at a feminist event, you will always find someone who is a misogynist pig. They're everywhere, unfortunately.
They're everywhere. What about the men?
Anyway, the less said about him, the better.
Yeah.
Righty-ho. And what's your moment of the week, Sam?
I'm going to talk about virtually meeting John Trickett at my constituency dinner. So as people who were involved with Labour Party politics will know, every year most constituencies will have a bit of a fancy dinner to try and raise money for campaigning, and they can raise lots of money, and that's good. And obviously, because of COVID, no one's had one, so we tried to organize one, which was very difficult because of aforementioned COVID. We got an agreement that John Trickett MP would come up and do us a speech, and then he was like struck down by a knee-related illness, which meant he couldn't come. But because of COVID, we had it all set up in the hall so we could do a virtual speech and then a virtual question and answer session with him, and it worked quite well. But the thing more important than him, more important than John Trickett himself, who is of course really
more important than John Trickett,
is just the getting together and talking to people who all have this burning feeling that everything is wrong in this country and the drive to try and make it better. And that's one of the things we've missed during COVID, because we've known things were wrong, but we've felt alone in it. So we need to, as long as it remains safe to do so, get around other people who also feel that way. And that is where our power is.
Thank you. Brilliant. I feel that the two gentlemen have had their noses put out of joint by these amazing. I'm getting told off for calling you ladies. Sod off. They are ladies, and that's that. But sort of have two amazing gentlemen as well. Stuart, moment of the week.
In my little hometown, we had a big fancy film crew out. They're filming The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, and we had Jim Broadbent walking a dog up and down the street for a few hours, and there was 200 people there watching him. Yeah, and the best part is I couldn't go because I had to go sort something out with some CCTV quotations and man in the front desk at the council office. So
if anybody ever says you're not a perfect councillor.
Oh yeah, so I missed Jim Broadbent walking a dog.
And have you missed very much, Stuart? Are you heartbreaking about this?
It's all over the local Facebook. People loved watching him walk this little dog up and down the street, you know, for fancy cameras. But yeah, I missed out. I've completely missed out.
It's exciting, isn't it? They get excited when Vera comes as well. Anyway, well done, Chilton. In sort of a very sort of, and what's it called again? We need to make a look out for this.
The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry. I think it was a book about 10 years ago about a fella who finds out that an old colleague's got cancer. So he goes to post them a letter, but then he keeps walking to the next post box and the next letter box. And eventually he walks all the way from Devon up to Berwick, which is, you know, quite the journey. And I think the story is, as you're walking that far, you're musing over what's gone on in your life and the decisions you made. So it might be more interesting than Jim Broadbent walking a dog.
You see why they spent so long, though, clearly. A lot of the film is about him walking. Right, thank you, Stuart. God bless you. That is an amazing moment of the week for you and for Chilton. And finally, Paul, moment of the week.
My moment of the week has kind of been taken up by the main topic, but I'm sure Tim will share the picture of the crabs all being dead. This awful scene that looks like a horror film of thousands and thousands of crabs dead between Saltburn and Marske. So I'm sure that will be shared somewhere. It is absolutely horrible, but I'll bring it up in the next bit. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about Novara Media being shut down by YouTube earlier on. They decided that they'd broken their terms and conditions. Novara Media is a big left media channel, got loads and loads more viewers than us. And I think the interesting thing that is happening at the moment is left media is being shut down. And I think we need to take this incredibly seriously. It's happening on Facebook. It's happening on YouTube. It's happening all over the place. So if you can do us a favour and try and beat the algorithms that they're doing, which will be promoting things like paid for promotions, people with a lot of money, and also they'll be trying to shut things down. We may appear less in your streams. So do us a favour, tell people about us, share us, and I don't know. I don't think anyone's been shut down from Twitch yet, so maybe we're thinking about making a permanent journey to a different platform at some point. We'll have to see, but we'll have to see who'd come with us to go to either Daily Motion or Twitch or something like that. We'll probably still go on all the others as well, but we may be focusing on less well known ones from now on, because it is quite frightening. And what was very interesting as well is the solidarity shown to those people was much greater from the right-wing media than it was from centrist media. A lot of centrists were very, very happy that Novara Media were gone because they present a left-wing point of view, whereas the right-wing media were like, no, all points of view need to be heard. That's very, very interesting to me.
I sort of clouded over when you're talking about Twitch and all those other things. Sort of, I only know Facebook. Sort of, you're moving on down the road. What's blockchain? And we've talked about blockchain before. Mark Lumley's mentioning blockchain. Is that another way
We'll
of
find out. We'll find out.
Anyway, sorry, that's really interesting. And really worrying as well.
But they're back on now because of a bit of a grassroots campaign to get them on, and there were other things involved as well, which was quite interesting seeing it happening in real time in a few of the groups that we're in. But yeah, independent media is very important, and I'll just plug the IMA at that point. But make sure that you're sharing things, and make sure you're subscribing to us on YouTube for now while that happens, because that does help us in the algorithm as well. But you know, let's see how that goes, and let's see how long that lasts. I was told about 6 months ago to get off Facebook because they'll be useless in 6 months. But, you know, we've got a lot of people on Facebook watching at the moment, so.
Okay, right here. Thank you for all that. And sort of, I know that you spoke out in support of Novara Media on your platforms. Owen Jones, I saw him doing the same thing, and we just got to make a fuss about these things, I think. It was very easy at the beginning, wasn't it? Because social media was a thing of the people, but it's definitely been appropriated by the establishment.
Actually, there's a really, if you would indulge me for a second, there's a really interesting thing about 2017 that meant that I think it was Donald Trump was in a big argument with Facebook and was threatening to sue them about trying to put his things to the bottom, and that inadvertently helped the Labour Party because word of mouth rather than paid for promotions got precedence, and people's word of mouth communications really worked, and that's part of the reason why Jeremy Corbyn went from being someone who a lot of people considered to be a terrorist, which was being said in the mainstream media, which is a ludicrous thing to say. All of a sudden they were like, oh, this guy's actually all right, he's okay, and a lot of people changed their minds, and then it changed again later on. So yeah, interesting.
Absolutely. Can I also point out before we move on just how many other people were involved in the women's banner group? I've got Lynn Gibson, Heather Wood, and if I've forgotten to mention your name, other people as well. You're all really marvellous. Thank you very much. An important job you're doing. Sam says her signal's dropping out. Mine isn't Sam's. Mine's, but I just got a funny noise then. Anyway, let's move on to the big story.
Now it's time for the big story.
Brilliant link, Cat Cray. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you as well. Okay, the big story today is that the government, in advance of COP26, which will be another big story in about a fortnight's time, but the government in advance of that announced with a big kind of fanfare its net zero policy. Paul, tell us about it.
Okay, so the government decided, well, this was actually Boris Johnson. He decided to announce to a room full of billionaires what the UK plans to do about climate change, about how we're going to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050, which is considered to be a far too unambitious target by a lot of people. A lot of people are saying that 2030 might already be too late, actually, by now, but 2030 should be the bare minimum target as far as a lot of people are concerned. But we're going 20 years beyond that as a country at the moment, and trying to do it there. There were some things like they said, oh, we're going to give like a certain amount of heat pumps away, or money towards heat pumps for people rather than them using gas central heating. But it turned out that it was like going to be only 90,000 boilers when there's like 250,000 at least, like I think every year installed, or probably even more than that, to be honest. And it seems like everything was like paying lip service to things, which is the way the Tories do it. They were talking about electric cars as well and infrastructure there, and they were saying, oh, we're going to put 600 billion into this, and 600 million into a certain thing, and so on. But like, if you consider that,
interrupt you there, Paul, for 2 seconds. That's the problem, isn't it? They're talking about 600 million, and they need to be talking about 600 billion.
Yeah, that's the issue. And what you've got is a situation where we've just done test and trace, and that cost like 37 billion over 2 years, and that is the kind of money you're talking about for something that largely failed. The testing system hasn't worked very well. The tracking system hasn't worked very well, although the testing system was by far the major spend in that. But also, like, that didn't really generate a lot of jobs and stuff. I don't know anyone who's working in those things. So, like, if you're going to invest in things, then it should create jobs that's going to circulate the money in the community. But what we've seen billionaires increase their wealth absolutely vastly over the past few years, and over the pandemic, and I think it's by a third in the first year of the pandemic. Billionaires increased their wealth by. We've just seen Elon Musk's made 36 billion in a day. So like, this kind of money, it sounds to us it's just silly figures. It really is silly figures, but to a nation, it's not anywhere near enough. So we've got this situation, and he also said like he's going to solve it through capitalism. Now, capitalism needs constant growth. You are not going to solve this problem through capitalism. It's going to have to be a social policy, because capitalism doesn't give a shit, and we can see that it doesn't give a shit because it will pump shit into the ocean, or so into our seas and into our rivers indiscriminately around the country, and just be like, yeah, that's fine. They're completely full of shit now, and we've seen the impact that's had in wildlife, we think, because of what's going on there, those areas that aren't safe to swim anymore. That's how seriously the Tories take day-to-day pollution. Like, imagine pumping a load of shit into our seas. That is happening now. There wasn't it 43 hours somewhere on the south coast that they were pumping untreated sewage, which will have all sorts in, not just like poo. It will have like all sorts of things, whatever you can imagine people flushing down a toilet. That's what will be in there. The government aren't taking it seriously. Capitalism is not going to solve this. Those billionaires in that room were being greenwashed. It was like, oh, look at us, we're really good. We're going to do some things. We'll put a little bit of our money into that. But they have hundreds and hundreds of millions, probably billions, invested into fossil fuels all the time. They are going to make their money out of what they've invested in before any of this gets solved. They aren't going to just out of the goodness of their heart say, let's do this. So governments need to be taking very, very clear action on this. I don't believe for a second the government are going to do this. They completely, just pay lip service to things. They're the kind of people who'd say, oh yeah, I absolutely love the countryside. I absolutely love it, and I'm a real bird lover. That's why I go out and shoot them on a weekend. It's like, that's the mentality we're dealing with. I really love wildlife and I think everything's great, but that's why I have my dogs rip apart a fox for fun. These aren't good people. They aren't doing things for anybody else, and they do not give a shit about us, and they do not give a shit about the environment. That's my opinion.
How would you meet the costs?
I would make the costs in a really sensible way, in that I would explain to people, rather than this ludicrous lie that household economies are exactly the same as nations' economies. And I would say, I shall print the money to do this. I will put that money into circulation, which will put the country to work on something serious. We saw during COVID that the economy didn't go down as much as like people weren't at work. You know, it wasn't proportionate to the amount of people who weren't at work. We've got a lot of people who sit around in offices doing nothing, and I'll tell you that now. Anyone who's ever worked in an office knows that a lot of people don't do anything. What you could do is get everyone working towards something productive. You could do less hours in a week to do it, and you could get that work done. You need to be investing in people, and you can do that through generating money. A lot of people would call this quantitative easing, by governments putting money into the economy. That's how economies work. You know, tax does not generate this money. It's a completely separate thing. It's a wealth redistributor. So we shouldn't be thinking in those kind of stupid terms. We've seen over the past year with COVID that there is a magic money tree. Governments can do this if they choose to. But the only time this is a real problem is when that money just disappears off out of the economy. That's when the problem is caused, and the problem is also caused when you overuse your real resources. So let's use the real resources of people, the real resources of work, the real resources of ideas. Stop consuming so much as well. Get rid of that whole idea where we have to consume more and more and more each year. And stop subsidizing ridiculous industries that cause a lot of climate change. Like they still subsidize like all sorts of polluting and dangerous endeavors for our environment. So there are all sorts of ways to do it, and we're not thinking about it in the right way. Basically, we just need to stop being capitalists and start doing things for socialism.
Let's talk about some of the details, Paul, and just give us your view on that. What about this liaison with Bill Gates, this £400 million liaison with Bill Gates to develop new technologies? Good or bad?
Well, why go to Bill Gates? I don't really understand. Like, what's it got to do with Bill Gates? Like, why is he the vaccine king? Why is he the technology king? He made a good company. He made Microsoft. It's a good company. It's done really, really good things. Well, good in a way. It's been a successful company. But he didn't do that. He developed some stuff, and then loads of other software engineers came in behind him and did all sorts of different things. Like, so why go to Bill Gates? It's like, I don't understand what this, like, why aren't you going to someone who's an absolute expert in, you know, renewable energy, or like someone who actually does this? Why is it Bill Gates? I'll tell you why it is. It's because it's an image thing. I spoke to this important man, Bill Gates, that you've heard of. Therefore, I'm doing something. It's the illusion of doing something. That's why they're talking to Bill Gates. It's nothing to do with what he can do.
Do you not think it's also to do with the charity side of things? What we're going to do is we're going to sort of put up kind of money, and you'll be able to bid for that money, and then you'll be able to work on projects, and it's all part of this project culture. Next thing, 2030, we're going to ban diesel and petrol from new vehicles from 2030. What do you think to that?
Again, this is going to hit poor people, I think. You know, until you make it cheap to create an electric car. And also, I think of all the people where they're mining these things in Africa. What we should be doing is moving to a sustainable public transport system. You know, it shouldn't be all about new cars. Maybe we should be starting to think, actually, a car should be a thing that maybe you hire every now and then when you need a specific journey. Why don't we improve the infrastructure? Why don't we make an infrastructure where it's easy to get to sustainable transport, where it's easier to get a much more lower emission transport, like buses and trains and things where you're traveling together in a group. And then you would need fewer of the sort of technology, the sort of battery technology and so on. You would need to have less, like lithium. And, you know, having a load of electric cars isn't going to solve this problem.
I'm going to ask you that question in a moment. So the next issue, the Treasury is going to lose tens of billions of pounds as we move away from fossil fuels towards renewables, particularly in terms of moving away from petrol and diesel cars. one of the ways that they're suggesting is replacing road tax with road pricing, where you pay per mile. Is that not a good idea?
I just think they're thinking about this all wrong. Like, why do they always want to tax ordinary people here? Why do they always want to tax people at the bottom? You know, like this week, Rishi Sunak's going to announce a tax cut for banks. Banks, they don't even get taxed properly anyway. So why aren't we going after the wealthy? Why aren't they considering a wealth tax? Because tax is supposed to be redistributive. As I said earlier on, it isn't there to generate funds. It's there to take money away from the people who benefit too much from economic stimulus from governments. That's what it should be there for. But that's not the way it's been used. So, like, you know, the thought of losing 30 billion in road tax or whatever they think they're going to lose, or in VAT on fuel. What does that even mean? You know, they're going to be taking a little bit less out of ordinary people's pockets. I don't really understand what the logic is there.
Got you. Last one. A nudge away from meat. He's going to nudge us away from meat. Comment on that, Paul.
I think we need to be realistic about what the meat industry is. So the idea of getting a load of animals, putting them in an enclosed area, I think we all have this idea of beautiful little farms in this lovely sustainable way of doing it. And then once every now and then they kill a cow and then they make the meat out of it or something like that. It's these massive factories where they're injecting them with loads of hormones to make them grow, and they're injecting them with loads of antibiotics which are making super resistant bacteria, and there's calves being born and taken away from their mothers, and then the mothers put straight back into the milking machine, and that's how they spend their entire lives. The meat industry is absolutely brutal. Probably, like, I don't really go on about that much, but I'm vegan and I'm not into the idea of eating meat at all. But I don't think other people have to feel guilty because of the lies they've been told about the meat industry. I do think that we need to move to a much more sustainable thing. I've often thought the idea of like a £4 or a £3 chicken at some stage, like, you know, what? How can a chicken survive to get to that size and then still make a profit for someone on £3? The meat industry is a very, very scary thing. We should be moving away from it. It does create vast amounts of pollution. I think it's almost 80% of the whole food industry's pollution comes from the meat industry. We do need to be moving towards more sustainable ways of eating. And that doesn't mean that everyone would have to give up meat, but it does mean that meat shouldn't be thrown away, for example, because there's so much meat thrown away in food waste at the moment. The way we are treating our food supply is absolutely shocking. We are throwing away things every day.
Thank you, Paul. Brilliant, by the way. Thank you so much for commenting. Sam, I'm going to come to you next. I'm going to ask you a council-related thing. There's a big debate following on about this, about whether we need to mitigate climate change. Do we need to be doing things to try and stop it, slow it down? Or do we need to just accept that we're never going to do that? We're only 1% of the world's emissions anyway. So let's give up, let's adapt. Let's just sort of make sure that when the floods happen, we don't get drowned, that sort of when the heat waves happen, that we've got people who will go and open the windows for old people and keep them cool. And this kind of thing. Which is the county council heading down, and which personally do you think is the way to deal with this, mitigation or adaptation?
I think there we go. Here she goes with the politician's answer. I think a responsible government and local government does both. Hey. The fact of the matter is, you know, with the local council, there are things that we don't control and there are things that we do control. So I have these conversations at the council, and we were talking about getting to net zero, and one of the problems we have with getting to net zero is the sheer amount of road traffic that there still is, and mitigating that is a huge issue. And you would say, well, this is what the public think, you're the council, sort out the public transport. But the council has very little control over the public transport. Even though the council subsidises some of it, there really is very little kind of teeth that the council has to force public transport companies, which are private companies, to do things that it wants it to do. And we want our public I say we, particularly the Labour Party, we want our public transport to serve our members of the public who need it, but the bus companies want to serve people who have the money to pay for it, and that's a huge problem. But the council is doing some wonderful things, including doing some really kind of trailblazing work in using mine water geothermal in its building projects. Heating energy used in heating is one of the biggest problems as well. It's very difficult to find alternatives to gas, and mine water geothermal is one of those. And of course, it is right here under our feet. Once you've got the infrastructure in place, it's free and it's totally green. So we'd love to see more of that.
Thank you. Just before you go, one last question about transport. Hydrogen or electricity, are we wasting our time putting all these charge points in and trying to get people to move to electric cars? Or is electricity the future and hydrogen pie in the sky after we've all died of climate change?
I think it's one of those sort of Betamax or VHS sort of things where people will scramble for what they think is the best, but ultimately it will be something totally out of left field that will be the answer overall. Remember when it was HD DVDs or Blu-rays? Hey, remember that? I think we're going to have another one of those when it comes to hydrogen. Or I hear there's another one that's on the horizon that's looking even more. Ammonia? Am I making that up? I don't know.
you know more than me, Sam. Last one. Nuclear or gas for our power stations?
Me? Are you talking to me?
I am.
I have it on good authority that there is no way to net zero by 2050 without nuclear. That's not me saying that, that's professionals saying that. And I think ethanol, that's what I was thinking about, Tim. I've obviously got ethanol on the brain.
Ammonia
yes.
would have been fairly disastrous for the population if you were sort of going to the petrol station and putting ammonia into your petrol tank.
No, don't.
It would have been fairly disastrous. Sorry, carry on.
Yes, and Lynn is telling me, and then Kat saying nuclear must not and cannot be an option. So there's really strong opinions on both of these, both sides of this. But I do hear from people who study energy that it's impossible to get to zero emissions by 2050 without nuclear. So what is the answer?
Small scale nuclear. Thank you very much, Sam. God bless you. That sort of Stuart. One of the big problems here, particularly for the unions, is a just transition. How does Boris Johnson's net zero strategy even begin to move towards a just transition? It's 440,000 jobs, one, a pie in the sky, but two, sort of a drop in the ocean. Sort of talk to us about whether it meets the needs of a just transition.
Well, the number of jobs is fairly irrelevant. I think it's the idea that, you know, it's woefully underfunded as a transitional period. If you don't put in the correct amount of money now, it's going to cost more in the future, and you will never be able to put that in then, you know. So they need to start spending and start, you know, unlocking what we already have. We have the capacity to do this. This is like our last chance, isn't it? This is the last kind of generation that will be able to do anything about it. We'll be the last councillors and politicians who will have this opportunity to actually make the change when it needed to be done. And the government is so they're clinging on to the idea of how to best make money for their mates. That if they don't act soon and, you know, use the money that's already there, that we already know we can access quite quickly, as COVID has shown, we're going to get nowhere. We won't have jobs for anyone, let alone for the people that he's talking about, these 440,000.
Thank you. God bless you, Stuart. To the point as always. And Laura, coming to you last. Just a whole load of hot air. The government's net zero, just flim flam and smoke and mirrors.
Well, I think there's plenty of evidence to support that that's genuinely what they do anyway with every topic we talk about. But I think they've kind of listened to, I don't know, what Extinction Rebellion is saying and what the climate activists are saying, and have kind of come out with this theory that has no basis in fact or plausibility whatsoever, because they don't intend to do anything about it. What the problem I've got with this government is that they seem to want to do everything the same, have the same outcomes, but in slightly different ways, where actually to tackle climate change, what we need is something really radical, completely different approaches, completely different ideas. We all need to really be realistic about the fact that we cannot continue to live our lives the way we are. And the government is still doing the same thing so they can keep their rich friends rich, and we're the ones who still pay the price, while also having the fingers wagged at us. You need to recycle, mind. And it's like, okay, fine, I'll recycle, but let's face it, you can't make us the scapegoat here. It does not rest on working class people's shoulders. You know, most working class people I know will try and recycle, will try and do, but most people don't have the amount of money it would cost to get an electric vehicle, don't have the kind of sway it would take to try and change huge corporations' mechanisms whereby they burn so much energy that it's killing the planet. You know, this is the only way we can change things, is through governments actually making a real change. That's why COP26 is going to be so important. Unfortunately, we've seen time and time again that the lives of normal working class people do not matter when it comes to ruling this country and making money, because we've seen 50,000 people die more now through COVID, and it's all about giving your friends and the fact that you're going to talk to Bill Gates because he's got a ton of money. Go to the scientists, go to people like, you know, I've seen Lynn comment, and we all know Lynn, Women's Banner Group, Lynn, she's amazing. She works with the Durham Energy Institute, and they're doing fantastic research that is falling on deaf ears. I went to the Labour Party conference in 20 years ago, 2018, and we sat in the Green New Deal compositing meeting for 6 hours, fighting for geothermal energy to be on even the Labour Party's policy, because it's energy that's there ready to be used. And it's, you know, it feels like we're fighting a losing battle, and I can see why people are getting so desolate about everything. But we need to think about changing things radically, and we all need to do that. And we're going to have to face some uncomfortable truths here, but essentially we're killing ourselves, we're killing our comrades, we're killing the planet, we're killing our species up and all around the world. We just can't continue like this. And I know it's difficult, especially for working class people, because those changes that we need to make don't lend themselves to people who don't have a lot of money. So the whole system needs to be changed to help make a difference, I think.
Yes, thank you. So I was reading a book the other day, and it was saying that before human beings appeared on Earth, roughly a species would go extinct every 4 years. We now run, if you count in plants and things like that and insects, we're now running at hundreds of species going extinct every week. It's the Anthropocene mass extinction, and it needs tying in with climate change. Sort of, how scared are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Me, terrified, absolutely terrified. I think it's an awful situation to be in anyway, but when you've got kids and you think, what are we leaving for them? And our daughter's really obsessed with plants and animals, and she wants to save the world. I don't know where she gets that from, Paul. But she says, like, we've got a couple of new housing developments going up here, and she like genuinely cries because she's like, but they're disturbing animals' homes. Can I write to someone? She was going to write to our MP. She's 7. She's going to write to our MP and tell them they need to stop building because they're disturbing. And I'm just like, do you know what? Out of the mouths of babes, someone that young can understand the impact that these decisions have, that capitalism has on our plant life, our animal life, human life. And I just wish more people could see the world like that.
Thank you. We spent a long time on this topic, everybody. Thank you for your indulgence, listeners. But don't you think that that was worthwhile listening to? Some fantastic comments from our team. It doesn't mean that we're going to go very quickly now. Second topic, Sam, very quickly. To what degree is the government messing up over COVID?
Now, I mean, haven't we had this conversation for 2 years straight? I mean, and that's the scary thing, is we could have had this conversation right at the beginning and we're back to the same thing again, that we all know they should be taking action right now and they're not. And you feel like that's gentle bit of like you said at the beginning of the show, John, you've made the decision to isolate yourself from other people as far as you can, and you've had to take that decision unilaterally off your own back. If you were in work, you wouldn't be able to make that decision for yourself because you'd be sacked. And for us with children, if one of my children gets COVID, I am not allowed to isolate my family, because then my other children will be getting unthingy absences, unauthorized absences, and I could end up getting fined as a parent for doing something which I know in my heart of hearts is the right thing to do.
Very sensible thing to do, yeah.
And removes the risk from other people. I don't know, and I shouldn't know, the medical history of everybody who works at school. I don't know if they've got issues, which means they can't be vaccinated. I don't know if they've got underlying health conditions or if they care at home for people who do. And I just feel that's very wrong. And again, it means that, rich people get to make decisions and poor people can't, because you are stuck at the mercy of your employer or whatever. And as you get lower down on the food chain of wages, you are much more disposable. And if you decide you don't want to come into work because you feel like you might have COVID, but you can't prove that you do, you will likely just get sacked, because that's the workplace at the moment, right? So why are the government doing this? Why aren't they taking action? And partly, again, I think they're playing the numbers. They think that we'll just bide our time. People aren't dying at the same rate they were at the start. So they're able to say things that minimize how terrible it is that we do have people dying of this disease, people who don't have to die of this disease, who are being exposed to it through the government's incompetence. And because there were more of them before than there are now, the government can say, there are less, like, I don't know the verbiage they've used is disgraceful. It's something like acceptable levels of deaths or something like that, right? There is no single acceptable level of deaths when those deaths are absolutely avoidable. And look, come on, right? Asking people to put masks on in public is not a big thing. It is not hard. In fact, just today, they've changed the rules in the House of Commons. So everybody has to wear masks, apart from the MPs. So everyone in the House of Commons has to wear masks, apart from the MPs, for some reason. But for some reason, that hasn't been rolled out to be the law for everywhere else. And that stinks to me. If somebody's done that risk assessment to protect workers in the House of Commons, that risk assessment needs to be rolled across the whole country, and we should all be back to wearing masks. And why aren't we wearing masks? It's because the argument as to whether or not we wear masks was causing a division in the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party pride themselves on not having divisions in the party, so they decided, oh, we'll just not wear masks and keep them down south happy. Well, they can all get lost.
Don't you think, very briefly, you've got less than 30 seconds for this, very briefly, Sam, do you not think that this is just a government that runs away from any kind of opposition? So people go mad about masks, they go mad about vaccinations, so they just back off. Sam?
I mean, they've learned that in a way, sort of opposition doesn't matter. They're trying to avoid splits within their own party, which is one of the reasons they haven't brought masks back, because it caused too much problems within the further right, more sort of freedom loving second. Not like the rest of us don't love freedom, but that's how they describe themselves, isn't it? Like, I want my free will, my free will not to wear a mask. All right then. But I think aside from that, I think this Conservative government has learned that it can just go back and rewrite history, like it's attempting to do about the beginning of the pandemic, where they just say, oh yeah, we did try and help people in care homes, but we need to keep reminding people that they put people who had tested positive back into care homes. They knew what they did.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm not going to take anybody else on that, people. We'll have a chance to talk about it. If people have noticed a lot of comments coming up on the stream as well. No doubt Sam will be able to take other people's opinions on that in the second half of the show. The next topic was sort of this kind of wave of poverty, of rising prices, particularly rising energy prices, shortages of goods, the sort of rising inflation. Stuart, I mean, do we really need to look forward to a significant decline in our standard of living this winter?
I don't think anyone's looking forward to it. I don't think anybody's like, well, we love poverty, let's have some more. But yeah, but that's what's going to happen though. There's officials saying inflation could hit 5% at the Bank of England. And as we all know, you know, your wages are worth 2009 levels, your national insurance has gone up, your fuel costs have gone up, your food costs have gone up, your rent's gone up, getting to work, you know, everything's gone up except the standard of living and your wages. And at the end of the day, having poor people is really expensive for a country. You know, all the issues that you think that a council has to spend a great deal of money on are often, you know, contributed to by poverty. The cost of social care, the cost of, you know, all these other aspects of healthcare are all contributed by high levels of poverty. And if we want to save money, we have to make sure people have enough money in their bank accounts to eat, to heat their homes, to live a dignified life. And it's a shame that we have to explain this over and over again, that it's in all our interests that poor people have enough money to live a life.
You are fantastic, and you're so succinct as well. I mean, I notice in the budget, which is tomorrow, that council funding is not one of their protected areas. I mean, do you worry that sort of, are you worried that councils are going to continue to be underfunded, and what effects might that have?
I think they are intentionally underfunded as a political manoeuvre. I think that while the councils are underfunded, it's very easy to shift the blame away from national politics, away from Westminster, and be able to point the finger for, you know, the levels of poverty in your area, and, you know, your lack of access to doctors, and all these local things are dead easy to point the finger at somebody else when you've got a county council and a county councillor that you can blame.
Thank you. People of Chiltern, if you're listening to this man ought to be our county councillor, shouldn't he?
Yes.
And last question of the evening. And again, I'm going to move straight. If you've got comments about the growing poverty, put them on the chat stream, and Sam can celebrate them in the second half of the show. Because I took so long about climate change, I'm just taking one person on each of our 3 other subjects. And I also forgot, Paul, to do the jingle. I'm not going to do it now, but I just apologise. Laura, your subject was a fantastic one, because they've discovered that when people started defacing statues, they made a audit of all the statues they had, because they wanted to protect them. And sort of as part of that they've discovered that there are more statues to animals in London than there are statues of women. And I rather feel you might have something to say about that. You have the floor.
Yeah, well, first of all, the fact that they discovered this after we've been telling them this for quite a long time is quite a shock. It's like, it's not a shock to any activist who is a woman or cares about women's representation. This is not a shock. We've been saying this for a long time. This is why the Women's Banner Group went on a mission to get blue plaques, because there are none. They're all of men in buildings in County Durham. Obviously, we've changed that now, but there's loads and loads of activism on this up and down the country. And I've met, since starting the Banner Group, I've managed to meet some absolutely fantastic women. And I'm now part of a group. They were called Invisible Women, but it's just changed to Visible Women. And they're all
About
different they're all different campaign groups who were trying to get funding and permission to put up statues of women. So we've got the Match Girls Memorial. Obviously, we've had Sam Johnson on the show before, Sylvia Pankhurst, Virginia Woolf, Mary Anning, Factory Girls, Mary Astle. I'm missing some, I know I am, but we're all in this group together, and we all like share each other's, I've done this with the council, and oh, we're trying to do this, and we shared our news reports for the weekend, and we're just all really encouraging each other, because actually this is a big deal. You know, representation does really matter, and if the women we see who we can be proud of and, you know, look up to and our children want to be are just the Kardashians of the world, then what message is that really sending? Because actually women have had a place in history forever, have made huge achievements, and it just never gets recorded. So yeah, I'm not surprised that there are more animals than women in London at all. I am very pleased that there are steps to rectify that. Obviously, we need good socialist women. I wouldn't thank you for a Margaret Thatcher statue, but, you know, we've had that conversation, I'm sure, a few times. But yeah, it's a huge deal. And I just hope every single one of these groups gets the go-ahead for every single one of the statues, because they're all worthy, and so many more.
One of the things I was watching a fabulous program on BBC4 about Black African authors, and the way Black African authors have really changed the face of the novel in our society. David Olusoga on channel BBC4, really worth watching. But one of the things that came up again and again there was that it's vitally important that young Black people see faces they recognize all over society as they're growing up. They need to see themselves or images, or mirror images of themselves as they grow up. And don't you think that this is absolutely the case? It's not just statues where women need to be represented. Young, growing girls, women, need to see themselves and role models all over every area of society. You're going to agree, aren't you? Yeah.
Totally. I think it's really important. We've spent so long sexualizing our daughters. You know, look at what's happened to Britney Spears. Let's face it. From day one, it was if you are attractive and you are sexy, you will get attention, you will make money, you will be successful. That is not what we need to teach our daughters. It's certainly not what I'm going to teach my daughter. She gets told she's beautiful because she is, but that is like, that comes after. You are clever, you are fierce, you are we're proud of you for trying your best, you know. That we need to, because these women do exist and have existed and have made huge leaps forward in different fields like science and exploration and all these things, but we just don't know about them. We need better role models for our daughters. And you're absolutely right in what you say. It's not just women, you know. Black history needs to be much more apparent in the UK.
Black History Month, October.
Yeah, and we don't have enough of it. And like I say, representation does matter. If you see somebody who looks like you on the telly when you're young, it stops that othering, and it helps to stop that racism, homophobia. You know, we get more trans people on the telly, in books, in literature, in statues, in, you know, wherever we go, to see. If you see somebody who's like you, like when I was younger, there were no blonde superheroes. It used to really annoy me. I was like, why? I'm gonna have to dye my hair dark when I get older because it can't be Wonder Woman because I'm blonde, you know. And that's a tiny part of it. We need better representation, and they do need to be everywhere. And it's not just statues, it's not just blue plaques, it's literally in our education system. It's the books we read and the lessons we learn, and what we teach our children of what value is. It's not about putting a short skirt on and being sexy. It is about being clever and being fierce and trying your best.
Brilliant. Thank you. I hope, listeners, you have appreciated the slightly different show today. I think it was really a refreshing change to hear extended views from these absolutely key socialist thinkers of our time. And well done, team. It's sort of, you laugh, Laura, but you can speak brilliantly, all four of you. You have ideas that are worth listening to, and it was worth listening to you today. Thank you so much. What's going to happen now, people, is that we're going to listen to a song, and no pasaran, and then what we're going to do is we're all going to return. Sam takes over the chair, and we do try. So we usually get distracted just talking amongst ourselves, but we must be fierce with ourselves, people. We do try to talk about the things that you've been saying, and then we try to engage in a little discussion with you and your tweets or whatever it is you're sending us. So thank you so much for being with us today. I don't think I've forgotten anything, Paul. I think we can go now, can we? And say goodbye. Goodbye until 5 minutes time.
My name is Jack Atkinson, I'm not afraid, and I live and die by this vow that I've made. The only good fascist's a dead one, they say, and around here we are. When I first left all them months ago, told him I'd come not to kill but to cure. Well, for an ambulance driver my shot's pretty sure. And around here we are. There'll be no pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. Fascists have come for our freedom, and we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here today. I told my mother, now mother, be strong, for the left way is right and the right way is wrong. And you can stick that on my grave when I'm gone, for I'm real we are. There'll be no pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. Fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here today. Cast may be cast, and the cast may be cast, but you armies of darkness, you best do your worst. 'Cause to win, yeah, well, you gotta get past those first, and around here we are. There'll be no pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here, no pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. No pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. No pasaran, no pasaran, no pasaran today. The fascists have come for our freedom, we ain't gonna give it away. There'll be no pasaran here today.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello, don't panic. I'm in control. Oh, here comes my tea. Thank you.
This is my work cup,
There we
by the
go.
way.
It's not your
Yes,
work
it is
cup.
my work cup.
Oh wow, it's my work cup.
Class.
One of the things we were talking about visibility and all that, and representation being important. We were talking, you know, a little women's banner group Coven. We were talking about the story of a lady called, oh no, why do they do that? Why are there all these pop-ups on news theory? Mary Ann Matcham. Mary Ann Matcham was a black woman who she was sold into slavery in Virginia, and she managed to get herself on a boat and stowed away on a boat for 4 months and landed in North Shields, where she made a life for herself and just like got on and had a husband and stuff. I just, it was a lovely story. I'll pop the link in the chat so you all can see. It's a bit of a challenge. It is a bit of a challenge in the Northeast. We've talked about this quite a lot, to try and have a strong level of diversity when you're trying to celebrate women's achievements. But that's a nice one. I just wish she'd settled in Durham and then she could have got on our banner.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we were talking. Do you know, I've had that conversation 3 times in the last 2 days about how our banner's incredible. It's like the women on it are amazing, but we don't really have like any people of color, and it's like that doesn't sit quite right with us. But also, like Durham historically has been quite white. It just has, Yeah.
So they must be out there, and we are doing our best to find them. Let's put it that way. But obviously, it's this is intersectionality, isn't it? Women have been ignored. Black people have been ignored. Black women have been double ignored. Yes, Paul.
A lot of the diversity that you might have in the northeast would be people who've migrated from places like Ireland to build the railways and Gypsy Roma traveller people and things like that. So, I think that could be a level of diversity that you'd have in Durham that maybe you wouldn't necessarily see by skin colour, but they have come from different areas, and although basically we're all immigrants here, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. It's a tricky one. Anyway, we've had a bunch of fantastic comments, and I finally have the power to scroll through them, for I have logged into the thing which enables me to do so. Although I only remembered about the thing that enables me to do so halfway through the show. So there we go.
I finally sent
Mark
you the
Lungley.
thing.
Yeah, Mark Lungley says instead of talking to Bill Gates, they should have talked to the guy who built a wind turbine in Africa from trash. Yes, they should have. There was a lot of really good discussion about electric vehicles and whether they are good, and obviously batteries are bad and batteries are difficult to dispose of and make, so that causes issues as well. And then what kind of power should we use to power the electric batteries? And it's really, really difficult, isn't it? I think I'm glad it's not my job to decide these things.
Mantha, I think what you can do here is quote your own quote back at you for this, and I honestly genuinely think that what was it you said, the perfection is the enemy of better or good or something, like
yeah, perfection is the enemy of the good. I was thinking that myself. If we're always going to just accept the most perfect option, we're never gonna do anything. And unfortunately, it's a mixture of all of these things. Some of these things might be a better solution for certain environments. Some of these things are going to be better suited to us here. Some people, these things are going to be better suited to places where power is more scarce and they need to prolong the ability to store electricity for longer. I was watching, quite like Click on BBC, if you ever watched that, and they were talking about different ways other than battery to store power rather than electricity themselves. And one of the things that they showed a model of was if you had surplus energy, using that energy to create a vacuum in a tube under the sea, and then when you need that energy back, releasing the vacuum and using the water to generate hydroelectric power for when you need it. And probably that's the future, is finding other ways other than batteries to store power. And that's very geeky of me, but maybe that's the truth.
Yeah, potential energy, isn't it? You can store things as potential energy.
There was a quick chat about fusion. Lynn said fusion is always 20 years in the future. There was a great part, wasn't it, where Laura was talking about how great Lynn was, and Lynn replied with, yes, Laura, you're
great
talking
point,
sense.
Laura.
She wasn't responding to that. She was responding to something else, but it sounded like...
It was just a slight delay, wasn't it?
You're right, I am fantastic.
It's doubly hilarious if you even knew Lynn and how much she never takes credit for anything. It's really annoying.
And you know what I'm struggling with as well is that I totally agree with, and I'm on board with how important it is to have a just transition. However, I think we've got a real communication issue over that, because I don't think the language that we're using at the moment is accessible to people who are like listening in from the outside, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't know. And of course, the government have appropriated the Green Industrial Revolution. The government are talking about the Green Industrial Revolution right now. That's what they're doing. It's almost as perverse as the thing they've done by saying that the minimum wage is the living wage, even though it's not the living wage.
Oh God! But they are, they're just taking the piss. They go kind of just come up with stuff and go, "That's a fact now," and you're like, "Is it?" But the history books will remember it as a fact. It's horrendous.
All right, is it though? Have you noticed all of the title for this episode is brilliant, by the way. I've lost it now. It's look at me doing my
was wading through shit to COP26.
There we go. Have you seen all of the Northern Tories, apart from Deanna, because she doesn't do that. She doesn't ever defend herself. And that's good, because it doesn't actually highlight them when she's done something wrong. But Peter Gibson and Richard Holden like to defend themselves. Have you noticed them defending themselves about voting to allow sewage to be pumped into waterways?
It's backfired because they've gone back on it tonight. They've Evolved Politics have apparently forced them into a corner with all this stuff, and they're going to have to now like change their policy on this and accept an amendment on it. So Paul Howell's been writing to people in our constituency saying it's actually not a very good idea economically to make them have to give, like, it's absolute nonsense. It's like complete economic illiteracy. But he was saying that like to make them do that, actually I'm not willing to allow them to push up prices because that will be bad. Although I will actually vote for a national insurance rise for those very same poor people. And it's like, well, you could just nationalise the monopoly, the unnatural monopoly that is water supply, and get rid of all the billions and billions that are paid out to shareholders, you know, which is just skimmed off the top, and use that money to make sure that our infrastructure's safe.
But I read, so there was a lot of constituents who expressed dismay at this vote, and there was definitely, I love the letters that Paul Howell sends back, certainly the ones that are on big issues that I've had. They're definitely copy and pasted, and I'm sure all the Tory MPs get them. This is what you say. But it, like, they were talking about how you can't do this, you can't, you know, spew a load of crap into our rivers. And he was like, well, actually, the problem with the Environment Bill is that it wasn't costed properly. And if we try and change that, I'm not willing to vote for something that'll cost our taxpayers money. And it's like, oh, now like the sword of Damocles over your constituent's head. It's like, this is your doing, I'm doing this for you. It's like, this whole attitude needs to change. This whole idea that, well, okay, but it's going to cost money, so we'll have to tax you. It's like, well, you don't have to, though, do you? Like, you could find the money. If we need to bomb someone, you can find the money. It's just
you could tax
pathetic.
Billionaires if you wanted.
You could. And the fact that you've just admitted you haven't costed something properly, you're telling us how inept you are, and then telling us you care deeply, so you're going to not charge us money, but maybe charge us the opportunity of going for a walk near water at any time ever. Ugh.
I want to know about this anyway. I want to know about this. Laura, you're gonna have to explain this in joke, or maybe you, Samantha, you might know it.
So we ended up. So one of our blue plaques at the weekend was in Aycliffe, which is in the constituency of Paul Howell, and he was invited, which is fine, and he was talking to us, which is fine. And Laura had her Women's Banner Group t-shirt on, which happens to have like Women's Banner Group and a triumphant fist emblazoned across her tits, right? So and it was really sweet, but he was like, no, stop it. Paul was like, I'd really like to find out more about what you do, and also more about this, gesticulating towards Laura's chest. And I just thought it was so hilarious.
And it wasn't just once, it was a few times.
It's like, well, Paul, I could give you a lecture on Laura's tits if you'd like me to.
Oh God, I really wish I'd gone. Sorry, Paul, I'm married.
I shouldn't. You feel bad. He did come. He didn't have to come. It was,
Yeah, but he was trying desperately to get in the for. I'm cynical when it comes to Tories. I'm sorry. He gave me his business card and was like, here, get in touch with me. I was like, I'm literally one of your constituents. I know how to get in touch with you. And maybe he doesn't know who I am. As if, God.
Haven't you been on John's show with him before? A few times.
Yeah,
He was quite misogynistic, really. I remember getting furious at home.
That show was intense, man. That was early on in John's political show. And he was it was the C word conversation that really got me. And at the time I hadn't really done that many shows, and I was like, I should challenge him on this, shouldn't I? And I just sat there just like in awe, like, I can't believe he's saying this. And if nobody knows what I can't repeat it because I'm not a racist.
He was speaking about people the way you would describe a box of crayons.
Yes, he was. And it's fine because his friends called themselves that. So he can do it too. And he kept saying
white
it.
South African friends.
Yeah. Oh dear. Anyway.
Chris has asked what our thoughts are on the expected announcement in tomorrow's budget, that the national living wage for those aged over 23 will rise to £9.50. No, so right, as always, right, I have opinions, but I go to experts on these things because I am not an expert, and the expert I use to talk about wages is the National Living Wage Foundation. If you're not aware of the Living Wage Foundation, livingwage.org.uk, go to them. They've been setting the national actual living wage for years, and they do that based on literally working out how much it costs to live in this country. So it's not just a soundbite, it's not just words that don't mean anything. They work out based on how much it costs to buy electricity, how much it costs to buy food, how much your rent is, how much it actually costs to live, and therefore what the living wage is in your part of the country. They do a general living wage and they do one for London. And I thought, whoa, £9.50, that's pretty good, because that is currently what the national living wage set by the Living Wage Foundation is outside of London. So I went and had a check on their website, and they have released a press release on it, and they recognise the rise in the national living wage is a positive step forward for so many people. However, the National Living Wage Foundation are about to revise their actual living wage on the 15th of November, and it's going to be significantly higher than £9.50. All right, because as you know, your gas and electricity's gone up, your petrol's gone up, everything's going up. We're talking about inflation at the rate of 4 or 5%, right? This is a serious amount of inflation going on. And also, if we've got a wage and that's what it costs to live, it applies to all workers, not just those over the age of 21. It's absolute nonsense to say that somebody doing a job at the age of 18 is worth less than a worker who is doing the exact same job at the age of 21, right? Especially in today's society, the idea of somebody being 18 and being a child, I mean, that's old-fashioned now. We know these people are young adults. They're not practice adults. They are real adults that deserve enough money to actually live on and feed themselves on. So those are my thoughts on that. Go on then, Stuart.
There's plenty of circumstances where that increase of just over £1,000 in a year will actually be basically taxed at a rate of 63% because of the limits of universal credit and your earning cap. So for all it looks brilliant, if you're actually a very low earning household with, say, a single person working a full-time position, perhaps a carer at home, 2 children, you're likely only to see about 400 quid of that increase, which got soaked up in your gas bill. It's nothing. It's useless. It does nothing for no one.
I just find the whole thing absolutely disgusting. It's like, yeah, we're going to raise it by like 50 pence. Woohoo, we're amazing. And it's like, yeah, that has to do the whole of the UK. We get it's going to cost a lot of money. But it just feels like we haven't moved on from like medieval times where the working class just have to, get on their knees for scraps. And it's like the whole universal credit thing, just getting rid of £20. Like, £20 is a hell of a lot of money for some people, and the people who are making the decisions about this £20 have literally burned 20 and £50 notes in front of homeless people. It's really shocking, the disparity of wealth in this country, and we're seeing it with the price rises in everything. Like, me and Paul, like, we both work full time. We're really lucky. We know we do quite well, but like, we don't spend it anymore. We don't go out every weekend. We don't do a lot of things. We don't go on holidays, and our money's dwindling because things are getting more expensive. How the hell do people who are already struggling continue to keep their head above water now when there's no help for them? And we don't have, the £20 uplift. They can't hold that over people as if they did something lovely this time, because they're literally going to kill people now, and we're going into a really harsh winter. I honestly, I'm terrified, really terrified about the state of this. The economics in this country seriously need to have a good shake up, and the idea that working class people are worth £9 an hour when the billionaires are worth like thousands and thousands of pounds a minute, like, and that's just accepted. How is that just accepted? And I know it's not just here, I know it's over the whole world, but it's not okay. There needs to be radical change here. We need to be getting paid for jobs. We don't need to be getting paid for status or ideas. Like you say, I used to work with people who were like 15 and 16 in a cafe, and because I was older, I got more money than them, but we did the same job. Like, that's not okay. Why does age matter? I'm sorry, I'm going ranty.
Just Chris has mentioned something on there that's kind of interesting. He said about how some employers aren't going. I think it's basically that some employers aren't going to be able to afford this, like charities, etc. And there's an aspect of it. We need to think about this from all sorts of different angles. So what you've had is, for years and years, you've had universal credit. You've had working people having to be given a subsidy by the government because their employers aren't paying enough, which essentially really if you can't live on the wage that your employer is giving you, then that means that the government is subsidizing the employer. So if Asda's paying people on minimum wage, for example, and then recording profits of like 93 million in a quarter or whatever, actually that 93 million has been partially government subsidized because they should have been paying more money to those people. And we see this quite a lot, but you do see like small businesses and stuff like finding it difficult to do that. And part of the reason for that as well is that those small businesses, different reasons. So let's pick a cafe, for example. If the government decide to cut my wage, which they have done, I think, at least 10, 15 times in my career in real terms as a teacher, then that means that I have less spending power, which means I'm less likely to go to a cafe, which is less likely to prop up the local business. So it's kind of like nonsense economics, really, to do that. It's economically illiterate to cut the pay of people in public sector, especially as I mentioned earlier on about how money's created. But anyway, there's all sorts of money wasted as well. So you think about all the checks on people for the Department of Work and Pensions to see if people actually deserved it. Actually, those cost more than they saved. So I think at times like this, if you're going to be talking about that, it's nice to see a little bit more money going towards those people. But those people, as Tim had mentioned, 63 pence out of every pound is taken off in deductions before they, for all sorts of different reasons. VAT is a tax that hits poorer people more. Gas prices going up hits poorer people more, and so on. Perhaps we shouldn't be thinking about minimum wages and things like that. Perhaps we should be thinking about a UBI, a universal basic income, and stop spending so much time trying to stop people from getting money that they actually need and spending loads of money on that, and just give everyone some money to live on, given that you can, and have that money circulate in the economy. Perhaps it's time to look at that, because it seems the system that we've got at the moment is complete and utter nonsense. And then good voluntary work, like charity work, because it's a labour of love doing the kind of charity work that Chris is talking about. People aren't doing it because it's a well-paid job. People are doing it because they care about those people, and it really needs to be done. So if they had a UBI to fall back on, then perhaps you would find more people doing things for compassion and doing things for social good. And final point I'd like to make is that so many destructive, either bullshit or actual destructive jobs get paid so well. Like corporate lawyers who write the rules that mean people can avoid tax get paid so well and do so much damage. And I'm sure that they probably got into it because they wanted to see justice done, and they find themselves writing these crap contracts and having these awful jobs where they do get well paid, but they know they're doing social damage. I think we need a societal change.
Drop the mic. Boom. You can't drop the mic because it's on a mic stand or on your table if you're a heathen like you are. I can't put this mic on a table, it's too sensitive. So it would
bit of a stand.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I do see the first part of what Chris is saying, which is, raising minimum wage is good. Yes, it is. But unfortunately, having been at the sharp end of Tory austerity for the last 11 years of my life, every single time they do something that looks good, I'm like, shit. What is coming next? Why are they doing this? Because, the reason they allowed furlough, right, wasn't because they were nice people. It wasn't because they really wanted to help the workers. It's because they knew their friends in big business were going to be up real shit creek if they couldn't have their businesses operate normally, and the labor laws that we have didn't really encompass what we needed to have in a pandemic. It was not about the workers at all. It was all about saving the business owners. Furlough. And when I say that they've increased the minimum wage by a good chunk, what that tells me is they've done some forecasts which indicate that unless they do that, the poorest in our society are going to starve. Right? That's what it tells me. So I'm glad they've done it, but I'm sorry. I really struggle to it's still the same government that is putting women through the trauma of talking to a benefits advisor about their rape to qualify for child benefit, right? That's the reality of the situation. So it's still the same government who is forcing disabled people to sit through absolutely debasing work capability assessments with untrained people who are not medical professionals, who are literally there to catch you out and to trip you up and to try and get you to say something that indicates that you don't need disability living allowance, right? That's not alarmist, that's the truth. So I don't trust them, not a single inch. And that's what it comes down to, I'm afraid.
Canny headline though, isn't it?
It's a nice headline. Yeah.
I think
It'd
that's
be interesting
probably
to
the
see
main
what the
reason
Living
for
Wage
doing it.
Foundation actually come out with what the actual living wage is next month. I'm a bit worried about that. Anyway, I'm fine because I've got 3 jobs. I'm fine. I must be doing well for myself, hey?
You're so greedy. Imagine having 3 all to yourself.
I must be rolling in it.
Oh my God. Just there.
That's why the employment figures look so good.
I know.
Exactly. I've got 6 jobs. I can afford to feed my children now.
No, stop lording it over us, Laura. Go on then, John.
I think there's in that amusing discussion you were having, there is a really important point that we should not be condemning large numbers of people to bounce along on the absolute minimum that you need to be able to feed yourself and heat yourself and clothe yourself, and being proud of what a good job we're doing. That level of subsistence living where you just manage to make ends meet, that is hell. I've lived on that. And it's a stressful and unpleasant life. And life is about more than just being able to put food in your and your children's mouths. There are things to do with proper socializing, with opportunities for sport and culture, for being able to go out and enjoy yourself, for not having to worry when the door drops off the dishwasher, because you can afford just to bring someone in to deal with the doors dropped off our dishwasher this tea time. And that's what life is about. And what gets me is the double standards all the time of people who are giving people £1,000 a year before tax extra. And and these people, they're getting paid tens and hundreds of thousands a year for going to a single board meeting every other month. And they're charging £300 a day to attend the House of Lords. And it's the contrast between the lifestyles of people who are making these decisions, and they're doling out money to live in ounces to people and keeping them consciously in poverty and absolutely depriving them of opportunity for advancement, for opportunity of enjoyment, and depriving their children of the ability to build a foundation, to build a life for themselves later on. And that is why Paul was absolutely right. This is about the system, and it's about bringing in a different world where we are not ruled by the rich, and where we share the product of our society more equally. And that's the answer to Chris Hood as well, who says, oh, if you put up this, well, everybody will be thrown out of work. If we had a society which shared the product of society more equally, you would not have that problem. And that's where it all goes wrong. And Cat Cray, I absolutely agree with you.
I've just dropped, going back to John Trickett, I've dropped a link in the chat again. He's put together a little report on options regarding oh, it's not there. I've told the link isn't working, John Trickett. Oh yes, it is. There it is.
It is.
He's
The
put
Office of John Trickett, the wealth tax one.
yes. He's put a little report together about different ways to tax wealth, and what is shocking, and we've talked about on this program before, is that during the pandemic there have been more billionaires created than there have been like at any similar point in history. Like, if there's any sign that the country is just going totally upside down, isn't that it?
Just on the wealth tax there, Samantha, if you don't mind, I really agree that there should be a wealth tax for John Trickett, but that is a backup plan. That is like the system has gone incredibly wrong, and therefore we need to make sure that those people who have somehow, the system is so broken that they have benefited from the economic stimulus of the government to such an extent that they have billions now, individuals. That's a broken system. So the only thing you can do there is tax the wealth, and I think it's going to get you 690 billion or something if you tax all the wealth that's over 100 billion. So it's like 690 if you do a 10% tax on the wealth over that. I think Richard Bergen tweeted that earlier on. I think that's part of John Trickett's thing. But that doesn't solve the problem. What that does is it says, right, on this one thing, we're going to bring things a little bit back in line. Those billionaires will still have stupid amounts of money. The problem is the system in which those billionaires end up with the wealth. And I think that as much as I agree with the wealth tax, that is not the be all and end all, and we can't, as the left, get our heads stuck in this thing where, we must tax the rich, we must tax the rich. Yes, we must tax the rich now because the system's broken. And then once we get power, tax the rich and then fix the system so that they just get a normal amount of money for their work, and and everyone is much wealthier and everyone is much better, and that money gets put into local economies and everyone feels the benefit of that economic stimulus from the government, not just a select few.
Do you have any suggestions about how we do that, Paul?
How we do that? You just smash capitalism, as Kat says. That's
Easy.
the idea. No. You just don't create a system in which in which this happens. You don't create a system where a government can choose to give money for government projects to their friends. You don't privatise things to an extent where people will massively profiteer from it. Like, look at Capita and look at Serco and all these massive companies that get government contracts regardless. Who was the one who went bust a few years ago? They had nothing in the bank and they were getting billions in government contracts all the time. Who was it? Or someone will tell us in the chat, I'm sure. But they were, this is the system in which we live, where billionaires benefit and everyone else it's Carillion, thank you, Mark, where billionaires benefit and everyone else suffers. The idea of shareholder profit, people need to understand what shareholder profit is. When shareholders make a profit, everyone's already been paid. That, when they pay shareholder dividends, and what they don't realise is there's all sorts of things like share buybacks as well, where the company decides, well, actually, I've got a load of shares, so we're going to spend our profit on buying those shares, which will falsely inflate the value of our company and make it look like it's this really, really, everyone's buying shares in this. And their shares go up, and then they sell them and they make even more money that way. And then the company's actually rubbish. They do all sorts of different things. We need to just get back to a nice, sensible system that is based upon real resources and real life, rather than the huge financialization of everything. Because, I'm not for capitalism at all, but I think the 60s form of capitalism, where you had a much more equal society and there were community projects and things like that, or there would be a big project like trying to get to space or something like that. You could actually see progress going on. But now there's no progress whatsoever, apart from billionaires taking off in massive penises and flying around into space. It is not what we want to see. It's dystopian if you think about it.
Right. On that note, I'm going to draw us to an end because I'm trying my best to keep this second part of the show less than an hour because we all need our rest. It was all fun in the early days, but a year and a bit in, we need to think about looking after ourselves. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight and giving your comments. There's more than 300 comments and 32 shares. Thank you so much. If you haven't dropped us a like or shared it with anybody, if you know somebody, maybe you've got a little, like, a little group, maybe a group of independent councillors you like to share it with. Who knows? You can please do share. And we're on Facebook. Oh my God, are we nearing episode 69? Do we have enough?
We are 65 today.
Oh, we're 65 today. Oh,
4 weeks'
wow.
time, we'll be nearly at Christmas.
Don't say that.
Don't say the C word.
We are on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, on Twitch, and on whatever app you use to listen to your podcasts. Please do go and find us on all of those channels, because you never know when they're going to do a Novara to us and shut us down for no reason whatsoever. And also, if you want to, you can be a member of Socialist Think Tank for free. Tim has told me to behave. Absolutely not. I have the work cup now. I am the master of the work cup.
Don't tell a woman to behave.
Our donate button works again now as well. So, we did miss a couple of months of donations. So, yeah, if you want to donate to us, you can.
You can. You don't have to. I need to get a Socialist Think Tank hoodie or jumper or something. Jumper, t-shirt, maybe.
We'll sort something out, definitely.
Yeah. And okay, and then we'll see you next week. We are on every Tuesday at 9:00 on all of those channels, and there are also other shows that I'm not on that you might like to watch. Okay then, bye.
Bye.
Okay,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Keep the red flag flying here.